My name is Elena, and I'm 17 years old. I've always been the invisible child in my family despite my straight A's and academic achievements. While my siblings Amanda and Jake get celebrated for the smallest things, I've learned to live with constant neglect and emotional wounds. Recently, I got accepted to a prestigious school that could change everything, but my parents refused to let me go. What happened next led me to uncover a shocking family secret that turned my world upside down and finally explained why I've always been treated differently. Before I tell you my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to hear how I discovered my true identity and finally found freedom from years of abuse. Growing up in suburban Chicago with my parents, Martha and Richard, was a constant exercise in feeling invisible. From my earliest memories, there was always something off about how differently I was treated compared to my older siblings. Amanda is 19 now and Jake is 18, and for as long as I can remember, they've made my life miserable with their constant bullying and taunting, all while my parents looked the other way or even encouraged it. I still remember my 8th birthday, when my parents threw a small party with just our immediate family. My cake was a simple grocery store sheet cake, and I received practical gifts like clothes and school supplies. Just 2 months later, Jake turned 9, and my parents transformed our backyard into a carnival complete with rented games and a bouncy house. They invited his entire class and hired a professional magician. Amanda's birthdays were similarly extravagant affairs. Christmas mornings followed the same pattern year after year. My siblings would unwrap the latest gaming console's designer clothes and whatever else topped that year's hot gift lists. My pile was noticeably smaller, usually containing necessities disguised as presents. One year, when I was 12, I received a pack of underwear and socks, while Amanda got a brand new iPhone, and Jake received an expensive gaming laptop. What made the situation even more baffling was that I consistently excelled academically while my siblings struggled in school. I would bring home perfect report cards that my parents would glance at dismissively before placing them on the refrigerator without comment. Meanwhile, Jake's C- in math was celebrated with ice cream because it wasn't an F like the previous term. I tried everything to gain their approval. I joined every academic club and competition I could, thinking that maybe if I won enough awards or brought enough honor to our family name, they might finally see me. But each achievement was met with the same lukewarm response. "That's nice, Elena," before quickly changing the subject to something Amanda or Jake had done. The worst part was how my parents made excuses for my siblings' behavior toward me. When Jake destroyed my science fair project the night before it was due, forcing me to stay up all night recreating it, my mother simply said, "You shouldn't have left it where he could get to it." When Amanda spread rumors about me at school, making it difficult for me to make friends, my father told me, "Stop being so sensitive. That's just how siblings are." Our home's physical layout even reflected my lesser status. While Amanda and Jake each had spacious bedrooms with private bathrooms, new furniture, and the latest electronics, I was relegated to the smallest bedroom in the house, which had previously been used for storage. My furniture consisted of hand-me-downs, and I didn't get my own computer until I needed one for school projects, unlike my siblings who received theirs as gifts. Over time, I began to internalize these feelings of unworthiness. I would lie awake at night wondering what was wrong with me. Why didn't my parents love me the way they loved Amanda and Jake? What had I done to deserve such different treatment? I began to believe that perhaps there was something fundamentally unlovable about me. The one bright spot during those years was Ms. Bennett, my 8th grade English teacher. She noticed how I would flinch whenever someone raised their voice, how I would apologize profusely for the smallest mistakes, how I seemed surprised whenever she praised my work. One day after class, she asked me to stay behind and gently inquired about my home life. It was the first time anyone had ever really seen me, and though I didn't tell her everything, her concern meant the world to me. She became a mentor and safe haven throughout middle school, encouraging my writing and helping me believe in myself when no one at home did. "Elena, you have a gift," she told me once after reading a personal essay I'd written. "Don't let anyone dim your light. Not everyone will see your value, but that doesn't make you any less valuable." Those words became a lifeline I would cling to during the darkest times at home, a reminder that maybe the problem wasn't me after all. When I entered high school, the dynamic at home worsened. As my academic achievements continued to pile up, the neglect and active sabotage from both my parents and siblings intensified. The daily examples of their disregard became impossible to ignore or excuse away. There were countless times when my parents simply forgot about me. They'd leave me waiting at school for hours after band practice, because they were busy with Amanda's shopping trip or Jake's baseball game. Once they actually drove away from a restaurant, forgetting I was in the bathroom. I had to call them from a borrowed phone, and when they finally returned 30 minutes later, they were laughing about how they only set the table for 4 at home before realizing my important events were consistently deemed optional for family attendance. When I performed a piano solo at the winter concert my sophomore year, I scanned the audience during my bow, hoping to see at least one family member. The seats I had reserved remained empty. Later that night, I discovered they had all gone to watch Jake's junior varsity basketball game, where he spent most of the time on the bench. My mother's explanation was a dismissive, "We thought your thing was tomorrow." Amanda and Jake's bullying evolved beyond typical sibling rivalry into something much more destructive. Amanda, knowing how important academics were to me, would often accidentally spill drinks on my assignments or delete my files from the shared family computer. Jake took a more direct approach, stealing my books or hiding my backpack when I had important tests. He once locked me in our basement for 3 hours when I was supposed to be taking the PSAT practice exam. At school, Amanda, being 2 years ahead, had poisoned many potential friendships before I even had a chance. She told people I was strange, unstable, or that I lied about things for attention. Jake continued this tradition, ensuring I remained isolated and without allies. The summer before my junior year marked a new low in their treatment of me. My parents planned a 2-week vacation to Florida, complete with Disney World visits and beach days. I overheard them discussing the trip and naturally assumed I would be included. 3 days before departure, my mother casually mentioned that I would be staying with our mother's distant cousin in Wisconsin. "But why can't I come with you?" I asked, struggling to keep my voice steady. "The tickets are already booked, Elena," my father said with a dismissive wave. "Besides, you wouldn't enjoy it. You'd just complain about the heat and want to stay inside reading anyway." I spent those 2 weeks in a small apartment with a relative who barely knew me, scrolling through my siblings' social media posts of their perfect family vacation, all smiles and inside jokes that pointedly excluded me. The fall of junior year, I threw myself even more intensely into academics, determined to create a future for myself beyond this family. I entered the state science competition with a research project on water purification methods that had taken me months to complete. Against fierce competition, I won first place and qualified for nationals. When I called home with the news, my mother's response was, "That's nice, honey. Did you hear Amanda got asked to prom by the quarterback?" When I returned home with my trophy and medal, my father glanced at them and said, "These science things are getting pretty easy to win these days, huh? Not like when I was in school." That evening, as they prepared to attend Jake's baseball team dinner where he was receiving a participation award, I finally reached my breaking point. I confronted them about missing my awards ceremony, despite it being only 20 minutes from our house. "Why couldn't you have come? You knew how important this was to me. I told you about it weeks ago. I even put it on the family calendar." My father's reaction was explosive and disproportionate. His face reddened as he stood up, towering over me. "Don't you dare use that tone with me. We do everything for you, and all you do is complain. Do you have any idea how ungrateful you sound right now?" My mother's response was equally disturbing, but in a completely different way. Her face remained completely impassive, her voice cold and dismissive. "You're exaggerating as always, Elena. We can't be expected to attend every little school function. You need to be more independent and stop seeking attention this way." Something in their reactions felt off in a way I couldn't quite identify at the time. There was an underlying tension that seemed to go beyond mere annoyance at being questioned. Later that night, I overheard them arguing in hushed tones in their bedroom. "She's asking too many questions," my father hissed. "She's becoming a problem." "What did you expect?" my mother replied. "We knew this would happen eventually." "Well, we need to be more careful about what we say around her," he said, "especially about her birth." That last word caught my attention. My birth. What about my birth would require caution when discussing around me? The next day, while my parents were at work and my siblings were at their respective activities, I searched through our family photo albums. I had seen them many times before, but had never looked at them with this new suspicion in mind. What I found was strange and unsettling. There were numerous photos of Martha pregnant with both Amanda and Jake, monthly progression shots proudly displaying her growing belly. But when it came to me, there was a conspicuous absence of pregnancy photos. The timeline jumped from Martha looking normal to suddenly holding an infant me in the hospital. I didn't know what to make of this discovery yet, but it planted a seed of doubt that would eventually grow into a full investigation of my true origins. The first semester of my senior year brought an unexpected opportunity that seemed like it might finally be my ticket out of my toxic home environment. My exceptional academic record had caught the attention of Westridge Academy, an elite boarding school known for its accelerated programs and direct pathways to Ivy League universities. Westridge wasn't just any prestigious school. It was consistently ranked among the top 5 preparatory academies in the nation, with state-of-the-art facilities, renowned faculty members who had formerly taught at universities like Harvard and Princeton, and an alumni network that included senators, award-winning scientists, and Fortune 500 CEOs. Most importantly to me, 98% of their graduates received scholarships to top-tier universities. The application process was rigorous and extensive. I had to submit not only my transcripts and standardized test scores, but also write 5 different essays, secure recommendations from 3 teachers, and complete a series of interviews, both over video call and in person. Miss Bennett, who had moved up to teach at my high school, wrote me a glowing recommendation, as did my AP chemistry teacher and my debate coach. Each step of the application process made me more excited about the possibility. During my campus tour, I found myself imagining what it would be like to live in the beautiful dormitories, to study in the massive library that stayed open 24 hours, to finally be surrounded by peers who shared my intellectual curiosity and teachers who would nurture rather than ignore my abilities. After months of waiting, checking my email obsessively every few hours, the acceptance letter finally arrived. Not only had I been accepted, but I had been offered a full scholarship that would cover tuition room and board books, and even a stipend for personal expenses. The only costs my parents would need to cover were the one-time enrollment fee of $500 and transportation to and from the school at the beginning and end of each semester. I was ecstatic. This was everything I had worked for, a chance to escape the daily psychological warfare at home and finally be in an environment where I could thrive. I rehearsed how I would tell my parents, preparing counter-arguments for any objections they might raise. I even created a presentation outlining all the benefits of Westridge and how it would cost them less than keeping me at home for my senior year. When both my parents were home and in relatively good moods, I showed them the acceptance letter and launched into my carefully prepared speech about the opportunity. "This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance," I explained, trying to contain my excitement. "Less than 5% of applicants get accepted, and even fewer receive full scholarships. This could open doors to any college I want to attend afterward." I expected them to be surprised, maybe even a little proud. What I didn't expect was their immediate and absolute refusal. "Absolutely not," my father said, before I had even finished speaking. "You're not going." "But why?" I asked, genuinely confused. "It won't cost you anything except the enrollment fee and occasional travel expenses." "We can't afford even that right now," my mother said, not meeting my eyes. "Times are tight, and we need to be careful with our money." This explanation made no sense. My father was a successful financial advisor, and my mother worked as a human resources director at a large corporation. We lived in an upscale neighborhood, drove luxury cars, and never seemed to have money problems when it came to my siblings' expenses. "It's only $500 for enrollment," I persisted. "That's less than what you spent on Amanda's prom dress last year or Jake's new gaming setup." "That's completely different," my father snapped. "Those were one-time expenses for special occasions. And this isn't a special occasion. This could determine my entire future." "Elena, enough." My mother's voice was sharp. "The decision has been made. You're not going to that school. You'll finish your senior year at Lincoln High like we planned." "But why?" I pressed again, desperate to understand their illogical position. "Is it the distance? Are you worried about me living away from home because I could come back for holidays and breaks?" My father's face darkened. "We're not discussing this further. The answer is no. End of story." When I tried to bring it up again the next day, my father became aggressively dismissive, shutting down any attempt at conversation. "I don't want to hear another word about that school yet," he growled. "If you keep pushing this, there will be consequences." Shay. That evening, I overheard another hushed argument between my parents in their bedroom. I stood silently outside their door, straining to catch their words. "She can't go to that school," my father was saying, his voice tense. "It's too risky. What if she starts asking questions? What if someone recognizes the name?" I know," my mother replied, sounding anxious. "But we need a better excuse than money. She's not stupid, Richard. She knows we can afford it." "Then we'll find another reason to keep her close." I don't care what it takes. We've come too far to risk everything now because she wants to go to some fancy school. Their conversation left me with more questions than answers. What did they mean by too risky? What questions were they afraid I might ask? And what did they mean by recognizing the name? None of it made any sense, but one thing was becoming increasingly clear: their refusal to let me attend Westridge had nothing to do with money and everything to do with some secret they were keeping. Determined to understand the real reason behind my parents' refusal, I began a covert investigation. I waited for a day when both my parents would be at work and my siblings out of the house before sneaking into my father's home office to search for financial documents that might disprove their claims about money troubles. I knew exactly where my father kept important papers. He had a large filing cabinet in the corner of his office, meticulously organized with labeled folders. I started with the folders marked education and financial statements, hoping to find evidence of our family's true financial situation. What I discovered left me stunned and shaking with anger. In a folder labeled Westridge Academy, I found not information about my application, but complete application packages for both Amanda and Jake from previous years. Amanda had applied 3 years ago and Jake the year after her. Both had been rejected, their applications marked with notes indicating they didn't meet the academic requirements, despite my parents having paid the full application fees, which were considerably higher than the enrollment fee they claimed they couldn't afford for me. Even more telling were the bank statements I found showing our family's multiple accounts. Far from being in financial trouble, my parents had substantial savings and investment accounts. They had recently purchased a vacation timeshare in Aspen and were planning a European cruise for the following summer. There was even evidence they had paid for expensive SAT prep courses and private college counselors for both Amanda and Jake. The most hurtful discovery came when I found folders labeled with my siblings' names, each containing college savings accounts with substantial balances. Amanda's fund had over $60,000 in it, and Jake's was similar. I searched for a folder with my name but found nothing. Not a single dollar had been set aside for my education. As I continued searching, I came across a locked drawer in my father's desk. Using a paper clip, I managed to jimmy it open, finding medical records and what appeared to be legal documents. Among them was a copy of my birth certificate that looked different from the one I had seen before. This one was from a different hospital than where I thought I had been born, and there were other inconsistencies that I couldn't immediately make sense of. There were also medical records for my mother from around the time of my birth, but strangely they contained no mention of pregnancy or delivery. Instead, they documented treatment for stress and anxiety. I was so engrossed in trying to understand these documents that I didn't hear my father come home early from work. He stood in the doorway of his office, his face transforming from surprise to rage when he saw the papers spread out on his desk. "What the hell do you think you're doing, He roared, crossing the room in 3 quick strides. I stood my ground, clutching the Westridge applications. Why did Amanda and Jake apply to Westridge but get rejected? And why did you lie about not having money for my enrollment fee when you paid much more for their applications? His face reddened dangerously. You had no right to go through my private papers. This is my house and these are my things. Answer my question, I demanded, surprising myself with my boldness. Why won't you let me go to Westridge when I actually got in but you were willing to send them? He snatched the papers from my hand. You want to know why? Because they're our real children, that's why. The moment the words left his mouth, his eyes widened as if he realized what he'd said. But it was too late to take it back. What do you mean, real children? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Instead of answering, he grabbed my arm roughly and shoved me against the wall. The back of my head hit with enough force to make my vision blur momentarily. You listen to me, he hissed, his face inches from mine. You will never speak of this again. You will forget what you saw here today, and you will certainly never go to that school. Do you understand me? I was too shocked to respond, both from his physical aggression and the implication of his words. He released me with a shove and stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Moments later, my mother appeared, having apparently heard the commotion. Instead of checking if I was okay after being assaulted, she looked at the scattered papers and then at me with cold fury. You've really done it this time, she said in a low, dangerous voice. You just couldn't leave well enough alone, could you? You always have to push too far. He pushed me against the wall, I said, still stunned. And he said, Amanda and Jake are your real children. What did he mean by that? My mother's face went carefully blank. He was angry and speaking nonsense. Clean up this mess and go to your room. We'll discuss your punishment for invading our privacy later. She left without another word, closing the door quietly behind her, which somehow felt more threatening than if she had slammed it. I gathered up as many documents as I could, quickly taking photos of them with my phone before returning them to their folders. Then I went to my room, locked the door, and sat on my bed trying to process what had just happened and what it could possibly mean. The violent confrontation with my father and the discovery of those inconsistent documents lit a fire of determination within me. I knew I couldn't directly confront my parents again after Richard's physical outburst, so I began a careful, methodical investigation into what was increasingly looking like a lifetime of lies. First, I secured the evidence I had already gathered. I uploaded all the photos of the documents to a private cloud account and sent copies to a new email address I created that my parents didn't know about. Then I deleted the original photos from my phone in case they decided to check it. My next step was to reach out to someone I could trust. I made an appointment with Mrs. Garcia, my school counselor, under the pretense of discussing college applications. Once in her office with the door closed, I cautiously shared some of what I had discovered. I found some inconsistencies in my birth records. I explained, showing her the photos I had taken, and I've recently experienced some concerning behavior from my father that makes me question my safety at home. Mrs. Garcia looked troubled as she examined the documents. "These do look unusual," she agreed. "The hospital listed here is in Rockford, but I thought your family has always lived in Chicago." "That's what I thought too," I said. "And there are other things that don't add up. My mother doesn't have any pregnancy photos with me, though she has plenty with my siblings. And my father recently said something about them being their real children." Mrs. Garcia's expression grew increasingly concerned. "Elena, these are serious issues. Would you like me to help you access your official birth records? As a school counselor, I can request them for educational purposes." With Mrs. Garcia's help, I was able to obtain my official birth certificate. What we found confirmed my suspicions. The birth certificate I had seen at home had been altered. The official record listed a different mother, Sophia Lawson, not Martha Hayes. Richard Hayes was still listed as my father, but this raised even more questions than it answered. If Richard was my biological father, but Martha wasn't my mother, what had happened, and why had they lied to me? My entire life. Mrs. Garcia also helped me search newspaper archives for any mentions of the Hayes or Lawson families around the time of my birth. After several hours of searching, we found something that made my blood run cold. A small article in the Rockford Register-Star dated just 2 weeks after my birth. The headline read, "Local woman reports infant daughter missing after visitation with father." The article briefly described how Sophia Lawson had reported that her ex-husband Richard Hayes had failed to return their newborn daughter Elena after an agreed-upon visitation. Hayes and his new wife Martha were reportedly not at their residence and weren't responding to attempts to contact them. A follow-up article a few months later mentioned that the case remained open, but that police had few leads after the Hayes family had apparently moved away from the area. I sat in stunned silence as the truth began to take shape in my mind. Richard was indeed my biological father, but he had been married to Sophia Lawson before Martha. When Sophia became pregnant, they had separated or divorced. After I was born, Richard and Martha had taken me during a visitation and simply disappeared, relocating to Chicago where they raised me as their own, never telling me the truth about my real mother. Everything suddenly made horrible sense. The differential treatment compared to my siblings, the lack of pregnancy photos, the altered birth certificate, their panic at the thought of me going away to school where I might somehow discover the truth, or where someone might recognize our name from the old case. I needed more confirmation before I could fully believe such a devastating truth. Using social media and public record searches, I managed to find several Sophia Lawsons. Based on age and location history, I narrowed it down to one woman currently living in Madison, Wisconsin, about a 2-hour drive from Chicago. Her profile picture showed a woman in her early 40s with familiar eyes that made my heart skip a beat. The shape of her face, her smile, even the way she tilted her head in photos reminded me of my own reflection. There was no doubt in my mind this was my biological mother. I spent days debating whether to contact her. What if she had moved on and didn't want to be reminded of the past? What if she rejected me? But the more I thought about my situation at home, the more I realized I had nothing to lose. Finally, I composed a careful email explaining who I was and what I had discovered. I included a recent photo of myself and details only her daughter would know, such as my exact birth date and hospital. The response came within hours, and it changed everything. Elena, I have been searching for you for 17 years. Not a day has passed that I haven't thought about you and wondered where you were. I never gave up hope of finding you. Please call me at this number as soon as you can. I can't believe I'm finally writing to my daughter. With all the love in the world, your mum Sophia. With shaking hands, I called the number. When she answered, I heard a soft intake of breath. Elena, is it really you? Yes, I managed to say before my voice broke. I think I'm your daughter. Don't. What followed was a conversation filled with tears, revelations, and the beginning of a connection I had never experienced before. Sophia's voice was warm and emotional as she told me the full story. She and Richard had a whirlwind romance that led to marriage, but she soon discovered his controlling and manipulative nature. When she became pregnant, she decided to leave him, fearing his increasingly unstable behavior. They were in the middle of a bitter divorce when I was born. The court granted him supervised visitation once a week, she explained, her voice catching. 3 weeks after you were born, he and Martha came for the regular visit. They were supposed to bring you back after 3 hours, but they never returned. When I went to their apartment, everything was gone. They had planned it all along. Sophia had spent years and her life savings searching for me, hiring private investigators and keeping the police case open. But Richard and Martha had changed their phone numbers, moved to a different city, and managed to stay under the radar. I never stopped looking, she said, her voice breaking. I never gave up on finding you. As we spoke, a plan began to form. Sophia wanted me to come live with her, and more than anything, I wanted to escape the house that had never truly been my home. But I knew my parents, or rather Martha and Richard, wouldn't let me go without a fight, especially now that they suspected I might be uncovering the truth. We need to be careful, Sophia warned. What they did was kidnapping, and they could face serious charges. People who have gotten away with something for this long can be dangerous when they feel cornered. Together, we developed a plan for me to gather my essential documents and belongings and leave safely when the time was right. With my newfound knowledge and a connection to my real mother, I began preparing for my escape. Sophia and I spoke daily, developing a bond that felt more genuine than anything I had experienced with Martha in 17 years. We were careful to communicate only when I was sure I wouldn't be overheard, usually during school hours or late at night. The most important thing is your safety, Sophia emphasized during one of our calls. We need to make sure you have everything you need before you leave, because once you're gone, you probably won't be able to go back. I created a mental checklist of the essential documents and personal items. I would need my social security card, passport, birth certificate, even the falsified one-school records, and some personal mementos that couldn't be replaced. I also began secretly packing a bag with clothes and necessities that I hid in the back of my closet. Sophia hired a lawyer who specialized in family law and custody cases. We need to do this legally, she explained. As much as I want you here with me right now, we have to make sure everything is done properly, so they can't accuse me of anything. The lawyer advised that given the circumstances, including Richard's recent physical assault and the original kidnapping, we would have strong grounds for an emergency custody order once I was safely with Sophia. She also recommended filing a police report about both the historical kidnapping and the recent abuse. As the pieces of our plan fell into place, I knew I would need to face Martha and Richard one more time. I needed closure, and part of me wanted them to know that I had discovered their lies and was taking back control of my life. I chose a Saturday morning when Amanda and Jake were both out of the house. I found Martha and Richard in the kitchen drinking coffee and reading the newspaper as if everything was normal, as if they hadn't built our entire family life on deception and emotional abuse. I know everything, I said simply as I stood in the doorway. I know that Sophia Lawson is my real mother. I know that you took me from her and never told me the truth. The colour drained from Martha's face. Richard's expression hardened as he slowly set down his coffee cup. "Who have you been talking to?" he demanded, his voice dangerously low. "My mother," I said, feeling a strange sense of calm despite the tension filling the room. "My real mother, who has been looking for me for 17 years while you kept me here and treated me like I was less than your real children." Martha stood up so quickly her chair fell backward. "You ungrateful little..." she began, but Richard cut her off with a gesture. "You have no idea what you're talking about," he said, attempting to sound reasonable, though I could see the panic behind his eyes. "Whatever you think you know is wrong. We are your parents. We raised you." "You kidnapped me," I corrected him. "And then you spent 17 years making sure I knew I wasn't really wanted. Why take me if you were just going to treat me like an unwanted burden? Because you were mine, Richard said, his voice rising. You belong to me, not her. She was trying to keep you from me poisoning you against me. I wasn't going to let that happen. So you stole me and then made my life miserable. I laughed bitterly. Some father you are. Martha finally found her voice. We gave you everything, a home, education, food, clothes. After all we've done for you, this is how you repay us. You gave me the bare minimum while lavishing everything on Amanda and Jake, I said. You made sure I knew every day that I wasn't really part of this family, and now I know why. Richard took a menacing step toward me. You are not leaving this house. I don't know what nonsense Sophia has been filling your head with, but you are staying right here where you belong. I'm 17, I reminded him. In less than a year, I'll be a legal adult, and you won't be able to control me anymore. But I'm not waiting that long. I'm leaving today. Like hell you are, Richard snarled, moving to block the doorway. Go to your room. We'll discuss what punishment is appropriate for this behavior when I've calmed down. I stood my ground. If you touch me again, I'll call the police. I've documented the bruises from last time. Do you really want to explain to them how those happened? And while they're here, maybe I can tell them about how you kidnapped me 17 years ago. The threat of police involvement seemed to give him pause. Martha stepped between us, her face a mask of cold fury. Go to your room now, Elena, she ordered, and give me your phone. You're obviously not mature enough to have one if this is how you're using it. I'm not giving you anything, I said firmly, and I'm not staying in my room. I'm leaving. Richard's control finally snapped. You're not going anywhere, he shouted, lunging forward and grabbing my arm roughly. I was prepared this time. I jerked away and stepped back, pulling out my phone. I'm on a video call with Sophia and her lawyer right now, I lied, holding up the phone though the screen was actually dark. They can see and hear everything that's happening. Touch me again and they'll call the police immediately. The bluff worked. Richard released me and stepped back, though his eyes burned with rage. You have no idea what you're doing, Martha said, her voice shaking. You think she wants you. After all this time, she's just using you to get back at us. She's been searching for me for 17 years, I said. She never gave up on me. That's more than I can say for the two of you who had me right here and still couldn't manage to love me. I backed toward the front door, keeping my eyes on them. I'm leaving now. Don't try to stop me and don't try to contact me. My real mother and I will be speaking with the police and with our lawyer about what happens next. As I turned to leave, Richard called out, his voice suddenly desperate. Elena, wait. We can talk about this. We can explain everything. It's too late for explanations. I set my hand on the doorknob. 17 years too late. With those words, I walked out of the house that had never truly been my home toward a future, with the mother who had never stopped looking for me. The moment I stepped outside that house was the first time I felt truly free. A car was waiting at the end of the block, just as planned, with Sophia behind the wheel. Seeing her in person for the first time, I was struck by how familiar she seemed despite having never met her before. We had the same eyes, the same smile, even similar mannerisms that genetics had passed down despite our years apart. When she saw me approaching with my hastily packed bag, she jumped out of the car and ran toward me. We collided in an embrace that felt like coming home in a way that house never had. She was crying, and I realized I was 17 years of separation dissolving in seconds. You're really here, she whispered, holding me at arm's length to look at me properly. My beautiful girl, you're finally here. We drove straight to Madison, where Sophia had prepared a room for me in her cozy apartment. Unlike the sparse, impersonal space I had at the Hayes house, this room had been decorated with thought and care. The walls were a soft blue, my favorite color, which I had mentioned during our phone conversations. There were bookshelves filled with the kinds of books I loved to read, and a desk by the window for studying. I know it's not much, Sophia said anxiously as she showed me around, but we can change anything you don't like. I want you to feel at home here. It's perfect, I assured her, overwhelmed by the simple evidence that she had listened to me, remembered my preferences, and tried to create a space where I would feel comfortable. The first few days with Sophia were a whirlwind of emotions and activities. We contacted the authorities as planned filing reports with both the local police and Child Protective Services. The police were particularly interested in the kidnapping case, which had technically never been closed. Parental kidnapping is still kidnapping, the detective assigned to our case explained, and there's no statute of limitations on this type of felony. Sophia's lawyer helped us navigate the legal complexities of my situation. Because I was still a minor, there were questions about custody and guardianship that needed to be addressed. The lawyer filed for emergency custody for Sophia based on the original kidnapping and the recent physical abuse from Richard. Given the circumstances, I don't anticipate any problems with the court granting this, she assured us. But we need to be prepared for Richard and Martha to fight back. People who have gotten away with something like this for so long rarely give up easily. She was right. Within days of my departure, Richard and Martha launched a counter-offensive, filing a missing person report and claiming that Sophia had manipulated and essentially kidnapped me from them. They painted themselves as concerned parents whose troubled teenage daughter had been lured away by a stranger making false claims. The situation might have become much more complicated if not for the evidence we had gathered. The original newspaper articles about my disappearance as an infant, the inconsistencies in my birth records, the photographs of the bruises from Richard's assault, and most damning of all, the testimony of 2 former neighbours from Rockford, who remembered the young couple who had suddenly disappeared with their newborn. The legal battle was stressful, but ultimately short-lived. Faced with mounting evidence and the possibility of criminal charges for the original kidnapping, Richard and Martha eventually backed down. The court granted Sophia full custody, and a restraining order was issued against Richard and Martha, prohibiting them from contacting me. Throughout this turbulent time, I received unexpected messages from both Amanda and Jake. Their reactions were a mix of shock denial and eventually a kind of stunned acceptance. "I can't believe they would do something like this," Amanda wrote in her first message. "They're saying you're making it all up for attention." As more details emerged and the legal proceedings advanced, her tone changed. "I'm starting to remember things," she confessed in a later message. "The way they always treated you differently. Mum getting weird whenever anyone mentioned how you didn't look like either of them. Dad's anger whenever you asked about your birth. Jake was initially hostile, accusing me of destroying our family with lies. But as the evidence mounted, he couldn't deny the truth. I don't know what to think anymore." He admitted in his last message to me, "I'm sorry for how I treated you all these years. I was just following their lead, but that's no excuse." I appreciated their apologies, but maintained my distance. Years of bullying and neglect couldn't be erased with a few text messages, and I needed time to heal without the constant reminder of my painful past. The most important development during those first weeks was my application to Westridge Academy. Sophia was fully supportive from the moment I mentioned it. "Of course you should go," she said without hesitation. "This is exactly the kind of opportunity you deserve." When I expressed concern about the cost, she shook her head firmly. "Don't worry about that. I've been saving for your education since before you were born. I never stopped even when I didn't know where you were. I always believed I would find you someday." With Sophia's help, I contacted Westridge Academy to explain my unusual situation. The admissions office was understanding and worked with us to update my application with my correct legal information. The scholarship I had been offered remained in place, and arrangements were made for me to begin the spring semester, giving me time to adjust to my new life and legal situation. The day I received my updated acceptance package from Westridge was one of the happiest of my life. Sophia and I celebrated with a special dinner, and for the first time, I felt like my future was truly my own. My journey of healing was just beginning, however. The psychological wounds from 17 years of emotional abuse and neglect weren't going to disappear overnight. Sophia found a therapist who specialized in cases involving family trauma and identity issues, and I began weekly sessions to process everything I had experienced and discovered. The first few therapy sessions were brutally difficult as I unpacked the years of gaslighting and emotional manipulation I had endured. I had to confront the fact that the people I had called my parents had stolen me from my real mother and then punished me for simply existing, for being a reminder of their crime and the relationship Richard had had before Martha. "It's important to understand that none of this was your fault," my therapist emphasized repeatedly. "Children are never responsible for the actions or emotions of their parents or caregivers." Intellectually, I knew she was right, but emotionally, it was harder to accept. Part of me still wondered if there had been something I could have done differently, some way I could have earned their love and acceptance. The healing process was slow and non-linear. Some days I felt strong and optimistic about my future. Other days I was overwhelmed by anger or sadness about the years I had lost with my real mother and the childhood I should have had. Sophia was patient and understanding through it all. She never pushed me to call her mom or to immediately develop the kind of mother-daughter bond that would have formed naturally over years. Instead, she gave me space to navigate our new relationship at my own pace, while making it clear that she was there for me unconditionally. "I missed so many years with you," she told me one evening as we sat on her balcony watching the sunset. "First steps, first words, first day of school. I can't get those back, and that breaks my heart. But I'm here now, and I'll be here for all your future firsts. College acceptance, graduation, first apartment, first job. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. That's what real parents do." As the weeks passed, I began to understand what healthy family dynamics looked like. Sophia celebrated my achievements without qualification or comparison. She listened when I spoke, valued my opinions, and respected my boundaries. She showed interest in my life without being controlling or invasive. It was a revelation to discover that family relationships didn't have to be characterized by constant anxiety, walking on eggshells, or fighting for scraps of attention and affection. Love I was learning shouldn't be conditional or used as a weapon. By the time I began my semester at Westridge Academy, I had made significant progress in my healing journey. The school itself was everything I had hoped for and more. The classes were challenging in the best way, the teachers were engaged and supportive, and for the first time I found myself surrounded by peers who shared my intellectual curiosity and ambition. On weekends and holidays, I returned to Sophia's apartment, which was now truly beginning to feel like home. We were building new traditions together, creating the relationship we should have had all along. Looking back now, I realized that what happened to me was not just a personal tragedy, but a profound violation of trust and law. Richard and Martha stole more than just a baby. They stole 17 years of the relationship between a mother and daughter. They created a household built on lies and maintained it through emotional abuse and manipulation. But despite everything they took from me, they couldn't take my resilience or my future. I refused to let their actions define the rest of my life. With Sophia's support therapy and my own determination, I was breaking free from their influence and creating a life based on truth, love, and genuine connection. The path forward isn't always easy. There are still days when the weight of the past feels overwhelming, when I'm angry about all the years I lost. But I'm learning that healing isn't about never feeling pain. It's about not letting that pain control your life. I'm sharing my story because I know there are others out there who may be experiencing similar situations, who feel isolated and unloved in their own families, who sense that something isn't right, but can't quite identify what. To them, I want to say, trust your instincts. You deserve to be loved and valued. And sometimes family is not about blood or legal documents, but about who truly sees you and cherishes you for who you are. Have you ever felt like you didn't belong in your family? Or have you discovered a family secret that changed everything? Share your experiences in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe if my story resonated with you, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes finding your true self means leaving behind what you thought was your home.